¿Qué tal? Buenas tardes a todos. Ya está llegando la presidenta del Parlamento Europeo, Roberta Metsola.
Good afternoon, everyone. President Metsola is about to arrive. We will begin in about a minute, and you will be able to pose your questions. We will have a very brief introduction because we only have 50 minutes ahead. Here's Madam President.
Welcome.
You again.
Good to see you again.
How are you?
1 year later.
It's been 1 year.
My pleasure.
Hi.
Muchas gracias, señora Metsola, por estar hoy con nosotros.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Metsola, for being with us today. We know you have a busy schedule. Thank you to the almost 400 young people who are with us here today. This is an event organized by the Office of the European Parliament in Spain when we are 100 days away from the European Parliament elections. I'm not going to extend my introduction any further because we have a very short time. I'm sure there will be many important challenges to the European project that we'll hear among the questions. Elections will take place between the 6th and the 9th of June, depending on the country. In Spain, it will be the 9th of June, Sunday. This is the largest election in the world. Only India mobilizes more people to vote during a democratic process. There are 372 million people. Well, each aspect of our lives, our lifestyle, depends on these elections. There are going to be decisions regarding safety, the environment, energy, and what will be decided. We'll also have to deal with democracy, human rights, future values in an uncertain world where there are many threats from different autocratic powers that are trying to manage the international order. Well, there's a long work to be done. In 2019, in Spain, only 60% of there was only a 60% turnover. There were also local elections in Spain. The previous elections in 2014, the turnover was only 45%. There are many young people among us today. If we look at them back in 2019, depending on the age range, between 42 and 47% of the youth voted. We need to convince young people to vote. We want them to feel more engaged with the European project. Today, we have a large number of young people, around 400 people from different environments, from different backgrounds, and I'm sure they will be able to pose questions to President Metsola. I would just like to break the ice by asking the President.
I've understood you, but now when you ask me a question, slowly, more slowly.
Why do you think that young people must vote on June in this?
So first of all, thank you very much. Do you understand me when I speak English? Yes? All right, good. So first of all, very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for being here to listen and also hopefully ask questions. So I'll start by asking you to think, all of you, as to what kind of question, no matter how easy or difficult you think it is, no matter whether you know the answer to it or not, just please be prepared to ask me questions. Now, you were just mentioning, if I understood you correctly, the fact that when we compare elections for the European Parliament with national elections, regional elections in Spain and in other countries, the number of people who vote is less. And then when we talk also about the number of young people who vote, it's also less than other parts of the population. And I'm hoping that you leave this room today not only convinced that you will vote yourself, because I hope that I will be able to convince you myself directly to do that, but secondly, that you will convince young people who you know, your families, whether it's your parents, grandparents, anyone who probably say European elections are not important, my vote doesn't matter, whether I vote for this person or this other person, it will not make a difference. The answer to this is it actually makes a huge difference. Every vote we take in the European Parliament, do you know how many Spanish members of Parliament there are now in the European Parliament? Do you know how many there are going to be in June? Ah, you were well prepared, right audience, okay. So, 61 people will be voted by you on the 9th of June. Our slogan is, if you don't vote, others will decide for you. And I don't think you want others to decide for you. I think you want to be able to decide who represents you for the next 5 years, for Spain and for Europe.
Muchas gracias, señora Metsola, por romper el hielo. Vamos a comenzar ya con el turno de preguntas.
Thank you so much for breaking the ice. We're going to begin the Q&A session. I will ask you all to be brief. We have less than 49 minutes. Please introduce yourselves and say where you're coming from. You'll have the mic soon. Are you able to post your question?
Okay. Hello, I'm Daniel. I'm from ONCE, the Spanish Blind Organization, and today we are here about 20 people with disabilities who want to claim their rights and democracy. So in this sense, we know that the EU has recognized in several occasions, such as, for instance, the Guide to Good Electoral Practices, the commitment for voting to be accessible to all people with disabilities. However, we know that electoral laws are exclusive competence of member states, and that causes inequalities. So, what can the EU do in order to ensure accessibility and inclusion in the whole electoral process in all member states for those more than 400,000 people who were excluded in the last elections, so that measures like the QR code or other reasonable adjustments can be implemented at the same time in all member states? We really want to vote, but we want to do so autonomously and secretly. We are around 90 million voices, or in political terms, 90 million votes who know how to decide, so why put us aside there? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.
I have met I see with some of you when you came to Brussels, and I have met your organization, and let me just say that ONCE is amazing. You are leading the debate. I know you have been working in the European Parliament because we had a report that was negotiated actually by a Spanish member of European Parliament. His name is Dominic Ruiz de Veza, who last November, if I'm not mistaken, put forward this proposal of the QR code that you yourself has just mentioned, Daniel, as a way to increase accessibility for people with a disability to the vote. Let's say, I've grown up with an aim to make sure, and this is what politics should be all about, this is what the European Parliament is all about. You mentioned competencies, but this goes beyond the strict legal limitations of what competencies are, is that I want the European Parliament to be the house for all. And that every person who has a right to vote in our European Union should be able to do so freely, openly, and fairly. I grew up with my first cousin who was born deaf, and the first language I spoke, actually, before I talked in my mother tongue to my parents, was sign language with her. And today, she's exactly my age, 45, and she's very tough with me and telling me, you know, you have to do more for persons with a disability. And she tells me herself, look, we talk about sign language. There is no one sign language that can be used in all member states. I see somebody probably using the Spanish sign language now. 2, when we talk about Braille, because this was a discussion with regards to the QR code, Not every person who has a visual impairment can use Braille to carry out a civic duty. So the answer to you is very, very positive, very open. And the European Parliament, with this report, actually is pushing for the European Commission to come up with proper proposals in order to increase accessibility. And when we talk about guidelines or we talk about exchange of best practices, this is not just a big word, Daniel. This is the possibility for member states, members of the European Union, to look at each other and say, if that country is better than me, then I want to be as good as that country. And we still have huge differences between member states, huge. Whether it is with physical accessibility to buildings, accessibility on the workplace, whether it is to make sure that our opportunities are equal and fair, as I said, for all, and we could really turn to look at member states and the standards that they set.
Thank you, President Metsola. We're going to go ahead with another question. I'm Nerea from the High School Concha Villadenea. It's the second largest in vocational training in Madrid. We would like to know what can the European Union do to help us finish our vocational training studies in order to access jobs outside of Spain. Thank you. We're going to listen to several questions so we can go faster, and then President Metsola will answer all three of them.
I'm a four-year student of philosophy, politics, and economics here in Madrid. So, as you could imagine, I really appreciate your time here today. Thank you. And now, if we are here today, it is because we are interested in knowing what does really mean voting for the European Parliament next June. That's what I would like to ask you two main questions that, in my opinion, are strongly interconnected. First one, if we are interested in a geopolitical entity such as the European Union today, it would be necessary to ask what its interests are and whether they differ from those of the United States because of its security dependence of NATO. And as a sub-question of the European elections, once the interests are defined, are they threatened by the rise of the far-right wing? And thank you very much for visiting our country and showing its clear interest in European jobs.
Thank you. Do you want one more? ¿Una más? Hay un chico. Adelante.
Thank you, President, for being with us today. This is Ignacio Dancausa. I'm the chairman of the youth wing of People's Party here in Madrid, in the team of President Ayuso. And I'd like to ask you about one problem, one issue that is growing between young people, and is young people doing drugs and having access to drugs. And I'd like to ask you if there's any new policy coming soon to fight drugs. Maybe we should protect the border more. Maybe the European Union should push countries to fight the drugs, and not. We have countries in the European Union where some drugs are legal, and maybe we should also fight that. So that's my question. Like, is the European Union planning in the next years on doing something to fight drugs, also secure the border, young people not having access to drugs, something like that? Thank you.
All right. So, vocational studies. First of all, I forgot to tell Daniel before that we have just adopted the European Union Disability Card, finally, after years, and that is thanks to the European Parliament that we pushed for equal rights for access and inclusion and movement across member states. On vocational studies, you said that you are still studying, right? Yes. So, have you been on Erasmus? Are you interested in going on Erasmus? How many of you have gone on Erasmus so far? How many of you want to go on Erasmus? So, okay, pretty much the whole room. You know, I went to France on Erasmus and I learned French and I had a great time. The possibility, and that's why we have extended it, and this was thanks to the European Parliament that we did, that we opened the program up that it is not only linked, for example, to how it used to be at the beginning, that you'd have to do exactly the same university course in one university and then go to do the same course in another university. That's how it was when I was a law student more than 20 years ago. 2, we extended it to vocational training. In other words, that you are able to, while you are studying, but also after you study, in order for you to be able to have the acquired skills that you need to enter the professional sector by going from one member state to another. So if you have a specific query or if you have been told that that is not possible, please tell us. Because we work quite a lot on this. We have a European Parliament office here in Madrid, and I'm sure you have the contacts of the persons who work there, in order for you to say, listen, what are my opportunities? You know, there is every few years, and you will understand, and you read the news, and I know you're very keyed into the topics, is that every few years there is let's say, the temptation to spend less on programs like Erasmus, on programs like Horizon, on research. The European Parliament is your best friend there, because the minute we go into any financial negotiation, we always say, never touch or decrease the money that we have placed on flagship programs such as Erasmus. We have actually this morning had an agreement with 26, actually out of 27 member states, on further funds on science and technology, because that is also something that we saw is lacking in terms of what we invest as a European Union, in terms of our competitiveness when compared to the United States and other third countries, and also in terms of making sure that this is part and parcel with the extra financial help that is being given to Ukraine. Because what was important for the member states, including your own, including Spain, is that yes, we need to give more help to Ukraine, yes, we need to do more for natural disasters and for migration, and yes, we also need to do more for science and technology and Erasmus. So please make sure that you are not in any way given the impression that there are less funds and not more. And that if you feel that your opportunities are not as good as they could be or they should be, please tell us. The last time I was in Spain, I received the same question, I remember. And there it was specifically from a student who was from a rural area, who told us, we are in Madrid. In Madrid it's much easier than it is if you come from somewhere which is far away from a city. And that I have taken very much to heart with me, and I have spoken with all levels of Spanish governance in order to make sure that any policy that is available and equality of opportunity is given to everyone across the country, no matter how close or far away you are to a big city. On security and the right wing, so we are currently living in a period of polycrisis. I have been president now a little bit over 2 years. At the time when I had just been elected, we were still in the, I would say, hoping to come out of a very difficult pandemic. I was asked the question, what are your priorities? And I remember very clearly saying, we need to reinvest in basic economic structures of our societies in order for us to go back on that path to recovery. I would never have imagined that 4 weeks later we would have a war on our continent. I would never have imagined that we would have a huge energy crisis, a bit different of a debate here because of your very, very well done investment in renewables. This is important and very important to keep in mind with the leadership of your country in this area. And 3, that we discovered, not only on that day when Russia invaded Ukraine, it should have been earlier, that we might find ourselves as a European Union alone. And that we can no longer think as a Europe that we have automatic partners if we don't work on them. First of all, many member states of the European Union had been cautioning us about aggressive and expansionist neighbors. Some other member states had said, look, we are being squeezed out or in, depending on how you see it, by a huge economy, which is the Chinese one, which is built on a value system that is extremely different to ours. We also are competing on an economic level with the United States. And what we don't want is to lose our competitiveness, to have the brain drain that we have, to be the leading continent on patents. You know, we create, we invent, but then we don't build. So these are things that have to really come to the fore of our debate as we map out what we mean by strategic autonomy or strategic independence in 2024, in 2025, in 2026. And this is without even going into speculation of electoral results, whether it is here in the European Parliament or in the United States. You mentioned in your introduction that this is a jumbo year of elections. No election and no result is predictable, except perhaps in Russia. That's a predictable result, or Belarus. But everywhere else, you fight for elections. And when you fight, you do it by voting and by choosing. So for your second question, that is precisely what I would like you to do if you want to build and not destroy. In the European Union, and not only in the European Union, but across the world, we are seeing an increasing tendency of people who want to destroy and not to build. People who run campaigns, projects based on fear rather than hope. Now you might say, you are talking about hope, isn't that naive? No. I'm in politics because I think politics is a force for good. And because I truly believe that politics is a force for good, I would like to present myself as a part of that constructive pro-European majority in the European Union that fights against who wants to destroy. And when I mean destroy, is that when you have a decision in the European Parliament on whether to increase money for students, on whether to have the European Disability Card, on whether to increase accessibility for everyone, to have social and economic cushions for the impact of the big, difficult decisions we are taking, there are members of the European Parliament who vote against. And that is completely the opposite of what I stand for, and completely the opposite of who wants to see a stronger European Union where member states work side by side together. Doesn't mean making everyone the same. Very clear. European Union does not make us the same. We have different traditions, different cultures, different languages, different ways of doing things. But where it's good, we level up. That's what it means to fight and counter the narrative that you mentioned. On drugs, for me, there are two fundamental pillars. There is enforcement and there is education. What do we mean by enforcement? We are seeing the largest ever import, smuggling of cocaine in the European Union ever seen before. Ever. Through ports, through very different situations. We have studies which show an extremely high prevalence of access and use. Now, I can tell you there is nothing that scares me more than what you just mentioned. I am the mother of 4 boys, and the eldest is almost 7. He will be 17 next week. He will vote, by the way. I hope he votes for me, but let's see. Now,
you have to be good.
I have to be very good. I need to do my pitch. But I am scared that maybe the education system has not helped him enough for him to be able to be aware, to say no. And that our enforcement is not enough to be able to control what is the largest smuggling operation. You have different pillars: people smuggling, you have drug smuggling, you have arms smuggling. These are the pillars on which all our security and law enforcement should be based on, especially in the European Union.
Do you want another round of
Sure.
Let's go to another round of 3 questions. For example, the guy who's wearing the black jacket. Please, I ask you to be brief.
Well, Mr. Metsola, in order to your European political affiliation, and in order to the next European election, I would like to know, in your personal opinion, which is the level of commitment of the European People's Party in order to not arrive with two agreements with the far right, referring obviously to ECR and ID.
Okay, next.
Next one, la chica.
Next question.
Well, thank you so much for coming here, Roberta. I'm Maria, the president of Young European Federalists, and we would like to know, especially because we are focused on activism and how to improve young people's life, how can we fight against Euroscepticism, especially on the young people, because we are so worried that when we would try to talk about our speech, we have a lot of problems and a lot of Eurosceptical I will say arguments coming around, so we want to know how to fend against it. And thank you so much.
Okay.
And third question, please. The floor is yours.
Hello, President. I'm from IES Valdebernardo, and I wanted to ask you about if you could give us some information about loans and scholarships for people who are going to enter university in the European Union or in Spain. Thank you.
All right. So, for the first question, first of all, I represent every single member of the European Parliament, not my political group where I was originally elected. That is important for me to say. I represent everyone. And I was elected by that pro-European constructive majority that I mentioned before. And I continue to be optimistic that it is that majority that will continue to take the lead in taking the decisions for the next 5 years. And I tell you this because we have no choice. If anybody would have the temptation to think that people who have, let's say, resorted to the comfort of the extremes, and I will answer this by linking it to Maria's question, and that's going to make their individual lives better, then we have a big job to do. It is our responsibility to counter that narrative, and it is our responsibility to say where we have delivered. We've had a huge amount of successes over the past 5 years. Those successes would not have been possible during the pandemic, on the Recovery and Resilience Facility, on REPowerEU, which is Recovery and Resilience Facility is the economic program that is going into the digital and twin transition also here. REPowerEU, in order to make sure that we invest as much as possible into electricity diversification, away from fossil fuels. Climate emergency is ticking. On digital, on artificial intelligence. Next month, we will vote on a big migration pact for the European Union that for your country has been seen as a very good success of the European Union, also thanks to the presidency that your country had for the last 6 months of the European Union. And I say this because none of this would have been possible if it were not for that core of the European Parliament that found itself in the ability to work together in the center of the political spectrum. I find myself, and I am firmly part of the center of that political spectrum, and I can tell you that it is very painful to see, even though the numbers are very small, where we have votes, for example, to help Ukrainians fight a very, very difficult war, and you have people from the extreme right of the spectrum and the extreme left of the spectrum to vote against. This is something that for me I find difficult, but it is my responsibility to counter that with a message of hope, with a message of work and a message of understanding that we can deliver real, tangible success for our citizens. Now, how do we bridge that, Maria, to Euroscepticism? You know, when I first ran for the European elections 20 years ago, 2004, it was the first election for my country. We had just joined. We will now celebrate 20 years together with another 9 countries on the 1st of May. We were standing side by side. I was involved in student politics with the Jeffers of the time, the new Jeffers of my country, who are now also members of the National Parliament or members of the European Parliament, very proud. And already then, we were fighting a campaign of Euroscepticism. And I remember thinking, we are young. We have the world at our fingertips. I come from an island. I'm going to be able to, together with my generation, join the other, at the time, 450 million European citizens to become one with greater opportunities, more rights, more standards, and a better quality of life. But already then we had to explain that. And if I look back now, where I'm going to be running my 5th European Parliament elections in less than 100 days today, because in my country the election is on the 8th, 100 days today, is, are we able today, have we managed to explain well enough? Can we be honest? 20 years have passed. What kind of reflection process are we going to have? When we are successful, do we say it? When we are not successful, do we say it? Are we honest about where we did not do enough? Are we honest about where maybe we have gone too far, too fast? You know, you, I presume, watch, I don't know, how do you see your news? Do you watch TV when you go home? You have late, is it late, your like everything else you do late in Spain? Are your evening news very late? Do you watch them?
9 p.m., yeah.
At 9, yeah, they are late, you see, 1 hour later than where I come from, 1.5 hours. There are some countries where it's 6 o'clock, because I'm doing this in every country, so I get a little bit of a feel. Do you see, how do you follow your political representatives? On what? Where do you follow them? Tell me. Facebook? Ah, that's where your parents are, too. My mother is on Facebook and sees all the comments underneath my post going, ooh, who is this one insulting my daughter? I have to tell her to stop reading comments, but I'm not very successful. Do you get your news on Instagram? Do you follow politicians on Instagram? Do you have TikTok? How many of you have TikTok? At least you're honest. You know, in some countries they'll be a bit like, in my country they do that. Do you follow politicians there? A bit, more or less? Less. So you basically see videos of, I don't know, whether Mbappé is going to go to Real Madrid. That's what my second son is doing constantly, every day. Worried because, you know, he thinks they'll win everything after that. Anyway, so what I would like you to do, and this is my biggest concern in a way, is that when compared to 20 years ago, when you have information everywhere, you don't have to wait until 9 o'clock to watch the news at home. You can simply look it up. And what I'm hoping is that while you're scrolling, first of all, the information you get is not fake propaganda, is not an anti-European narrative that is being peddled very successfully, but that also your political representatives are willing to be accountable for the decisions that they took. Because that is another mistake that I think that we have made, is that we, you know, like to applaud ourselves, but we don't say, okay, so tell me what you think about the decision we took. And if you didn't like the decision, I have to be able to tell you, I understand you and I'm going to try to change that. And that's when we decrease Euroscepticism. To do that, we cannot ignore any voter, we need to be honest, and we need to hope that that honesty is translated into messages that are not peddled around in order to spread misinformation. We can do something together on that, and you can all help me to do that. Try to follow a little bit more politicians online would be my kind request.
The third one, I think it was...
Yes, loans and scholarships.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we have... Oh, you have to see what kind. Where are you? Who asked the question? There you are. So if we look at Spain, big concern with youth unemployment. 2, access to housing. 3, how can we make sure that when we have investments of the digital and green transition that I mentioned before, it is also used to allow young people to start their own business, to be entrepreneurs. And for you to be able, if you are studying something specific that universities want to invest in, but that it is in the interest of every country to make sure that you study for as long as possible in order for you to be as have a high level as education as possible, different areas. It doesn't have to be university, it could be technical, it could be vocational, it could be anything. But we need to have all the opportunities possible. There are funds that are allocated on a European level. I very much encourage you to push, and we are pushing actually national banks in order for there to be schemes for better access to funding. There are specific access, for example, if you want to change the equipment in your house to make it more climate friendly, if you want to change the vehicle you drive or the kind of mobility you use to a cleaner one, but we see less and less education help. And that is something that we have been pushing for, and we need to do much more. We have a committee in the European Parliament which is on culture, education and research. Look at which Spanish members you have in that committee and write to them. And get a commitment from them. They are online. We can give them to you. They'll be very happy to hear me saying this. But you write to them and say, do I have your commitment to push for better access to funding for us young people in Spain? I can assure you before the election they will tell you yes. Make sure that the day after the election they tell you yes as well. That's important. In terms of working or studying, in a particular, I went to the College of Europe. There is a specific scholarship that you need to work with. Do you study French? Do you speak French, any of you? Do you study a bit of French? That's all right. Not bad. Not bad. Okay. Okay. Good. So if there is a specific opportunity to go study at the College of Europe, which is for you to study European law, politics, economics, history, this is what I did. And then what I would really encourage you to do is to do an internship in the European Parliament. Paid internships. We don't have unpaid internships. We are very proud of that as an institution. And we also have an open, so anybody can come and spend from 1 month, even 1 week, to 6 months in the European Parliament. Do that. It is not because I'm the President of the European Parliament, I'm telling you this, but if it's on your CV, you can do really well with it. And most of you come for a reference from me anyway, so then I'll sign your reference if you need to apply for a job.
Buenos consejos. Bueno, vamos a abrir una nueva...
Usually I have about 50 applications.
Yeah, so, a lot of work.
Let's see who's going to come. So.
Vamos por aquí, una chica aquí en segunda fila. Adelante. Micrófono va a llegar ahora.
We're going to go ahead with the young person on the second row.
Well, thank you so much, Roberta Metsola, for being here. It's always a honor to hear you. I admire you as a person and also as a professional. So, well, I'm Marta Iborra. I'm an international relations student from Comillas. It's a university here in Madrid. Well, my question was, what is the role of us, young people, these days before the European elections? It is only the vote who matters. Should we do something else? Thank you.
Second one, una segunda pregunta por aquí.
Second question here, and then we'll go to the back rows.
Good evening, Roberta. Thanks you for coming today. My name is Alexandra Udovenko. I'm from Ukraine. And I'm finishing my master's degree here in Madrid because of the war. And Ukraine is a candidate for the European Union, and we know that it's like difficult and long process, especially during war. And my question is the following. Are there any perspectives or opportunities in European institutions such as European Parliament for students who are not citizens of European Union? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Y una última.
Thank you. And a last question.
Una última de esta ronda. Intentaremos hacer otra ronda más después, o sea que hay un chico ahí que...
We will try. I see a young man with a brown sweater. Go ahead. It's difficult to describe. I don't mean it about you specifically.
What did you say there? If everyone's laughing, what did you say?
It's difficult to say who's going to speak
later
because I don't have the names of them.
Buenas tardes, me llamo David.
Good evening. My name is David. My question will be...
Espera.
Gracias. Que buenas tardes. Y me gustaría saber...
Good evening. I would like to know which measures will the European Parliament take in order to face youth challenges on their daily lives in the scope of mental health. Since the student sector is very wide and a huge part of our lives, is decided in this short or not so short stage.
I can be quick. And how many more do we get?
Well, we have
how much time
10 minutes more. 10 minutos
so let's
más.
take one more question.
Okay, fine. Nos falta otro chico por allá. Venga, ahí está.
One more guy on the back there. So it's the most difficult place to access with a microphone. Hi, my name is Daniel. I'm a member of Team Europe, and I'm finishing my master in political communications. And my question is regarding that. In which way can the European Parliament improve communications so that their citizens, especially here in Spain, they see Brussels and Strasbourg as something that is quite far away? How can those citizens feel it as something that is important to them, and in that way increase voting turnover during the elections?
Okay. Well, to start with the last one, I mean, if you do political communications, I would tell you follow me, on Instagram, on TikTok. I'm doing all that. So I'm hoping, and you can give me, feedback as to whether we are trying to do a different type of campaign this time. In 2019, it was very successful, but we want to build on that success by having even more young people vote. Also, because in 4 countries, we have people who vote at 16, and in 1 country who vote at 17. And that is a different segment and different interests and different ways of accessing politics. But I was very much in favor of that decision to lower the voting age to 16 because I was convinced that, you can be able to take a decision. And what I used to hate most when I was young like you is that someone like me here on the stage would tell you, you are the future, wait until your time will come. I would be like, I'm standing right here, I have thoughts of my own, I have principles, I have values, I have dreams. So please, in terms of communication, identify what you think we should do, what we should say more. It is not only about what we look like, it is not only about, what you think on that one day, it is about political vision, it is about dreams, it's about hope, and it's about Europe being a better place for all. And we can make Europe a better place for all. Because if there's one thing that I would like to look back, is that we've become a little bit safer, a little bit fairer, and a little bit more equal. Do we see backsliding in some member states? Yes. In my country, a journalist was murdered. For me, that showed me that you can be in the European Union, everything on paper could work, but a system could fail somebody who was putting on the spot corrupt journalists, corrupt politicians. And that's the situation that we had. So for me, what I don't want to have is a European Union that fails its own citizens. It fails those who work for it. It fails its young people who have their whole lives to study, to work, to travel, to be able to overcome a very difficult type of epidemic, which is the mental health one. So we have asked for a year to be dedicated to mental health. We have, as a European Parliament, we see the numbers from the pandemic are very difficult. You lost 2 years. Would you say that? You lost 2 years of your schooling. You spent 2 years at home. Was it mostly 2 or was it 1? 1. So if there are some countries where it was 2 whole years. So imagine that your formative years, if you were 16 to 18, I look at those 2 years as being the ones, where you start to identify the subjects you want to study in university, etc. If you lost that, you spent a lot of time alone. We have more and more young people who are isolated in Europe than ever before. And this is a Europe that is more connected than ever before. But that's the paradox that we need to overcome. Number of suicides is rising, and we need to be much better at identifying, at having better psychological help, and really also for you, that you take care of yourselves and your friends, because this is difficult, and it's very close to us, and we all know somebody that has gone through this. In terms of youth, and the role. So you said you study international relations. You know, I always ask this. So how many of you here study sciences? Engineering, mathematics, physics, chemistry? See, I have two sisters who are scientists, and they asked me to ask this question because they worry that while it comes naturally to us if you study law, if you study political science, if you study international relations, that you study elections. I studied elections, you know, I'm a nerd in that situation. I love to study elections. Don't ask me why, but okay. Anyway, but this is something that I would like you to spread beyond this room. That it is not only students of these classic subjects that find themselves seeing an advert to come here, that say, of course I'm going to vote in elections, that have already identified your candidate, but that you not only vote, I will tell you, you encourage as many people as possible to hold their politicians to account, to ask questions, and then my favorite, to run for elections yourselves. It's not easy, but it will be harder when you're older. This is the one thing that's harder when you're older. And two, you might not get elected the first time. I didn't get elected the first time. I didn't get elected the second time either. When I got elected the third time, my father said, finally, she got elected. But I didn't give up. And I would like you to do the same. Because if you love politics, and if you are here, and if you know that there are things that we could do more, we could do a youth check. You know, young people have asked us for our legislation, where is your youth check? Are you sure that this is not going to impact youth adversely? Two, that when we come up with proposals, that we would have consulted properly, that we would cost our proposals better, that we make sure they're implemented, that they're enforced. So if I mention, going back to Daniel's first question, the European Disability Card, which will come into force in 2 years, that we make sure it's enforced in every member state. And we don't have to wait until member states are taking to court because they're not implementing it. So you can do much more by holding all of us to account, but also by taking the plunge. As I said, it's difficult. It's even harder if you are a woman. If you're a woman, I must say this. One gender-specific aspect, I would say, it's harder to be in politics, but don't give up. This country has done a lot, and you can do much more. On enlargement, you know, Spain, Alexandra, is one of the most pro-enlargement countries. Now you might say, where did you see this? Well, we have statistics that show this. And the way Spanish people have, and you have, I'm sure you have this experience, have welcomed Ukrainians, both refugees and those who were living here before, and opened their homes and their hearts. And that's amazing to see in this country. And I think you should be proud of yourselves and your countries, and how you have really opened up to brothers and sisters who are going through a difficult time in Europe right now. You said it takes a long time. Yes, it does take a long time. There are many steps, chapters, obstacles one would take. It took 10 years for my country to join. It has taken some countries much more. Western Balkans are asking us not to forget them, rightly so. And that, I would say, however, that when I went to Kiev on the 1st of April 2022, so within the first few weeks of the war, and I saw your country's leaders telling me that they will be faster than anyone else in answering the questions and making sure that the steps are taken, in leveling up, in following the rules, in reforming necessary reforms, I have been impressed with the speed with which that has been done. And that speed has been matched by us. Because, and here I'm very proud, in the European Parliament, I see a few members, or a few colleagues of here, now I start to see them beneath the light. I see Anna Collado and Eva Popcheva. These are members of the European Parliament. They represent you in the European Parliament, these two ladies here. And are there any more? Okay. No, because otherwise I start getting messages on my phone. Hello, I'm here. So that we were the first ones, already on the 1st of March, 8 days after the invasion, to say that Ukraine should be a candidate country. I can tell you there were other institutions who went slowly. We said, no way, no way. This is the moment. And then we were the first institution to say that we should open accession negotiations. And now that they've opened, we follow step by step. From a European Parliament perspective, we are doing a very rigorous exercise with the Ukrainian Parliament, with the Verkhovna Rada, committee to committee, foreign affairs, economy, environment, justice, liberties, reforms, in order to make sure that from a legislation point of view, you are up to speed. But we are pretty impressed so far. Congratulations.
Presidenta Metsola, no hay tiempo para más. Muchísimas gracias, de verdad, por compartir esta casi una hora.
Thank you so much, President Metsola, for sharing almost an hour with all of these young people. For us, it has been quite inspiring. We hope, well, in 100 days, Europe will vote, will elect their parliament, the engine of the whole project. And there's so many challenges ahead.
There are Ukrainians who work in the European Parliament.
Yeah, the non-citizens.
Sorry. Yes, you can.
Okay, yeah.
You can work, even if you are third country. Sorry.
Bueno, había temas muy interesantes, o sea que yo creo que hemos tocado prácticamente todos los grandes temas.
We've touched upon almost every subject
por acompañarnos
and topic.
Y gracias, Presidenta Metsola.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today. Thank you, President Metsola.